I'm hooked hard on the Swedish fish. I first got hooked on the fish in 2008. I was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq, and on our base there was a huge tent. There was a library, and they had some gym equipment, but a lot of candy and a lot of Swedish fish. So we would take this Swedish fish, and we would do patrols through the city there. We would hand them out to the kids, and they loved them. I mean, they would like bombard us. We walked through the city, it was 140 degrees, and you almost had to like fight them off. They were like wolf packs. But that was a good thing, because whenever there were kids around, that meant that there weren't going to be any suicide bombings. And that was always a really good thing. So that year came and went. We were there for about 10 months. Met a lot of good guys, a lot of brothers. After that year, I found myself back here in Battle Creek. I was here for about 3 months, and I felt really disconnected. I felt alone, and I didn't like that. I remember going to Myers one day, and I was doing some shopping, and I was at the candy aisle there where all the candy is. It's like my favorite spot. And they had Swedish fish. Well, I zoned out for like 5 minutes because it just brought back a lot of memories. And one of the ladies there asked me, she said, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I said, "No, I'm good." But I did need something. I needed that brotherhood. I was disconnected, and I didn't like that. So shortly thereafter, my buddy Joel called me. I deployed with him earlier. He said, "Hey, I'm going crazy. I want to get back in the fight." I said, "I'm with you, brother." So we called the state of Vermont. We said, "Hey, heard you guys are going to Afghanistan. Want some help?" They were like, "Yeah, sure." So we did the paperwork, filled it all out, and next thing you knew, I was in Eastern Afghanistan. Eastern Afghanistan itself is a really unusual area. If I were going to describe it, it's kind of like Colorado, Idaho, and Utah on steroids. They have the Hindu Kush Mountains. We were about an hour from the Pakistan border there. It wasn't a good place to be at the time. It's a Taliban headquarters. They own that area. But I had my brothers, and I was fulfilled. So we would do our patrols. We were at 8,000 feet elevation on our base, and again on our base there was this tent, and it was like a recreational tent, and there was tons of candy, and they had Swedish fish. And the kids of Afghanistan love Swedish fish just as much as the kids of Iraq. We worked really close with the Afghan National Army. We would train them on how to police their city and protect their citizens. And the ANA, is what we call them, they love Swedish fish. And I'm almost positive if the Taliban were here right now, they would tell you that they love Swedish fish too. So that year, that was a really rough year. When we left that year, we were there for just about 11 months. When we left, we were 2 men shy from when we started. We lost 2 good men, 2 brothers. So once again, I found myself back here in Battle Creek, and once again I felt disconnected. I felt alone, and I didn't like that. So, again, I volunteered for one more deployment. It's like, I tried being a civilian and just, it's really boring. I don't know how you guys do it. I'm serious. If you can put something on your bucket list, put getting shot at. It's like, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, it's really addictive. So this time I was in northern Afghanistan, and that's a really neat area too. It's really green, a lot of mountains. They have really good fruits and vegetables. I wouldn't recommend going there. It's not like a farmer's market per se, but they're really delicious. There was about 60 of us. We were on a very small base, about the size of a football field, if that. We were right in the middle of a city that hated us. They let us know it all the time. They would spit on us when we did foot patrols. They didn't like us at all, and we knew that. We would do these foot patrols through the city, and I remember in January, it'd be like 2.5 feet of snow. We got 50 pounds of gear on, we're patrolling the city and all that stuff, and they would come through and spit on us and yell at us and all this stuff. We had an interpreter. His name was Mufaso. It's like the Lion King, Mustafo. Yeah, so we had an interpreter. His name was Mustafo, and he was really good at chess. We always played chess, and he was really good at chess. I think it's because of when the Russians invaded back in the 80s. They kind of picked that up. We would give him $5 or $10. He would go in town and he would bring us back this food. This food was amazing. It was $5. You'd get this lamb kebab and all this bread and rice, and it was just delicious. I really got addicted to the Middle Eastern cuisine over there. It was so good. So like I said, we were on a very small base in the middle of a city that hated us. Well, sometime during that year, someone wanted to burn a Koran. So we had a lot of protests one day. About 1,000, maybe 1,500 people started protesting outside of our base, and it got worse. They eventually started throwing grenades, and 5 soldiers got seriously injured. 5 brothers. So at the end of that deployment, I was sent to a military hospital. I had sustained injuries from the previous deployment, and I was getting really bad migraines. So I spent about 2 years there. And then I was medically retired, and I was back in Battle Creek again. This was last year. But, and again, I felt disconnected, and I felt alone. I felt different, But this time I couldn't get back into the fight. There was no getting back into the fight. I was a civilian or a veteran. So I had to come to terms with that. So I did what any 32-year-old single person would do. I bought a one-way ticket to Warsaw, Poland. I was at a doctor appointment one day, and I was reading a magazine, and they said that the prettiest women in the world are in Warsaw, Poland. So, it sounds good to me, So, and they had a lot of World War II connections, a lot of museums on the concentration and the Jewish ghettos, and I had the best pierogies in the world. I mean, this grandmother made me pierogies. I stayed on her farm, and it was lovely. So I started there, and I ended up in Morocco. Just got to the tip of Africa, very little, just the very top part. And I remember being on the train going into Rabat before I hit Marrakesh, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, I wonder if I can go to Sweden and get Swedish fish. It's like a stupid question, but I think I still can. I'm not really sure. So once again, I found myself back in Battle Creek, and I felt disconnected, I felt alone, and I needed brotherhood. So, I started volunteering at the Haven downtown, and I've really gotten my brotherhood down there. And you just got to find it where you can. For me, I have a very, very large family, and they're very supportive. They're all here tonight, So now that when I think about my life, like in the last 10 years, I think about it in chunks, and I think about it from deployments. And I always remember when I was eating Swedish fish, whether it was in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever it was, it always reminded me of being a civilian. And I thought that I always wanted that. And now when I eat Swedish fish, it reminds me of a time that I spent with brothers overseas, and memories that run strong. And I always respect that. Thank you.